for those of you who may not be aware, this is a takeoff on something that's seen on ESPN every weekday with
Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon,
and Michael Wilbon.
Kornheiser, Wilbon.
Pardon the Interruption. And Ron developed this idea a couple years ago, said, why don't you do a Pardon the FINterruption and do real quick, rapid-fire things about what's going on in the industry and our perspectives.
It was so that we didn't have to debate because you kept losing, and I felt so bad for you.
Yeah, you did take home the gold belt one time, but I had the red boxing gloves, so that worked out pretty good. So with that in mind, we're going to go through things extraordinarily quickly. It's not a question-answer period. We may be wrong, we may be right. But, you know, when we look at what we're doing right now, you know, let's start. So we have a lot of organizations under 10 billion. We have many organizations over 10 billion. Is $10 billion enough in assets to succeed or even survive?
Well, the easy answer to that is yes, but the really question should have been, is 1 billion enough? Is 500 million enough? And the answer, Jim, is that yes, it is enough, depending on your business model, what you're going after, what your strategy is. You know, look at what's happened over the past few years with banking as a service banks. Many of them are sub $10 billion in assets, but they have tens of millions of customers. They're raising deposits. Amazing. You know, the business model may not be for everybody, but the reality is you can be a $250 million, $500 million financial institution if you've got a niche that nobody else can penetrate, a moat that's impenetrable, and focus on that. The problem gets to be when you start expanding and looking to serve everybody and have to start investing in new distribution channels and technology channels and regulatory and compliance issues. So you know what? You can succeed at well below 10 billion, as in fact well below $1 billion.
And how much has it changed over the last 5 years? When you look at this, I remember 2019, the Financial Brand Forum. It wasn't just the financial institutions meeting the solution providers. It was the solution providers meeting other solution providers going, you know what, guys? We can't keep on fighting like this. How do we collaborate to make it so we make it better for the financial institutions and make it so that they don't have to make the decision on which one or two providers? I think what we just look downstairs right now, we can say, you know what, if you have a problem to solve, we can solve it quickly, easily, to a degree, and we can do it in a very specialized way where we can make partnerships that can get us to the point where we're just like a large bank on the way we're opening accounts or serving customers or onboarding or managing our data, unlike ever before. And that's kind of exciting. And then you look at, there's examples. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have these podcasts where I'm interviewing what I'll call small banks punching above their weight or small financial institutions really doing amazing things. And it's happening everywhere. We've seen it here. We've had interviews with organizations. I think, you know, it's better time than ever. That's not to say we're not going to see mergers, acquisitions, change of management, all these type of things. But to say that you have to have over 10 billion or 100 billion or more to succeed is probably selling the organization short.
Yeah. Jim, I promise that I will disagree with you a lot more in the next 40 minutes, but I do agree with you about the partnership aspect. Yeah. And so it isn't about the dollar figure whether in the assets, it's about what your capabilities and competencies are, because it's not easy to partner. You've got to have folks who understand how to identify, vet, negotiate with vendors, scale, test them out. So it's like new competencies that are developed, that are needed, not just, hey, can we hit 10 billion so we hit some level of scale?
You know, we've seen it also where when we asked a survey on where are you in the digital transformation journey, some of the best performing organizations are the very biggest, no surprise, and the very smallest, because they're more agile. They're able to change their management structure in a mental state to say, what are we going to do to be better at what we do? How are we going to serve our customers better? It was interesting. We interviewed a whole lot of really good sized regional financial institutions. They're trying to say, how can we feel more like a community organization? You visit with the small organizations, they go, how can we serve our customers in a digital way just like the big guys? We have a dynamic there, but it's a very interesting dynamic that I think is going to guide the industry. In fact, we may see fewer organizations actually go out of business or fold or merge than before because we've made it more capable to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, I would encourage a lot of my clients, both from the bank and credit union side, to look at the merger as more of a last resort and really think about where is the organic growth opportunities and create a more of a framework for addressing that than simply saying, hey, we've got to merge to get to 10 billion.
And actually, if we do things that we're talking about, if we personalize experiences, we build trust, if we do the basics really well, there's no reason for a consumer to leave us. There's no reason for us to seek size for the sake of size. Yes. Do we want to generate new accounts? Yes. Yes, we have to do that. But we also, how do we get the accounts back that we've lost? How do we make it so that we build that 10 billion in an organic way that makes it so that our customers say, you know what, our members come back and say, we want to use the organization that we started with. They really are serving my needs the best and better than anyone else could.
So let's, before we get dinged, haha, gotcha. Before we get dinged, just got dinged, let's turn this around a little bit, Jim, and look at this sort of from the other perspective, the big guys who are just huge mega banks with over trillions of dollars of assets. Are we going down a path, Jim, from your perspective, where we're going to only end up with 4 or 5 really huge banks in this country?
Or just one? We talked about this on the phone a couple of times going, it used to be we'd compare ourselves to the top 10 banks or say, what are they doing versus the rest? And now there's a lot of conversations on what's Chase doing and the rest. And we've seen competitors, if you're number 6, 7, 8, 9, 3,000, we're all competing against trying to be the best at what we do. And I don't think there's any way we're going to end up like Canada or in a lot of countries in Europe where they have just a small number of financial institutions. Number one, we have so many to start off with. Number two, in the world of digital, small organizations can do very well competing with other organizations, big or small. I mean, we aren't going to get down to 2 pizza shops. We're not going to get down to 2 retailers. Now, we may do it differently. We've seen a lot of general retailing organizations go out of business, but it's because they weren't serving the needs of the client, and there was a lot of overlap. Well, it wasn't as regionally based, and I think, to think we're going to end up with 4, but I think you have some research that says we have to be careful not to rest on our laurels going, hey, we won't go out of business, because new accounts being opened, what's happening there?
Well, what's happening there are that smaller, not institutions, but fintechs, neobanks, challenger banks are actually dominating new account opening. Last year, I've been tracking this for a few years, the fintechs and neobanks got 44% of all new checking and payments accounts that were open. That was down from 47% the year before. So yeah, they're dominating a lot. But Jim, they're not dominating because they have better account opening. They're dominating because they're providing products and services that are meeting niche markets. And that's why we're not going to end up with only 4 banks. Because as long as there is a heterogeneous society and population out there for you to serve, there will always be niches. I think the challenge that many of you are going to have to face, and maybe already are facing over the next, will face over the next couple of years, is that the idea of community is shifting from a geographic concept to an affinity concept. So if you're in some town in Wisconsin, that's great, you serve the folks in the community. Seriously, what are the unique needs of the people in that community that are different from people down in Mississippi or Alabama? Maybe nothing. But if there are different segments that you're serving, and give examples of this is like Panacea Financial serving young physicians, not all physicians, but young physicians, they're finding the niches. And I think many of you are going to have to find the niches to serve. And the beauty of this is that you still have your customer and member base to grow from and to grow on and to leverage, but we're not going to see 4 banks.
No, I agree. And
despite what Elizabeth Warren and all of them want. Had to get there.
Yeah, there's a long road. And, when we talk about things we've talked about before, this is one of them. We've discussed this before. But, when you talk about another one, we've talked about branches. You and I have been on stage 10 years ago, probably longer than that, saying, okay, when are we going to have no more branches, all digital? What's your take on that right now?
Branches aren't dead, no matter what I say, and I love to say that they're dead. But look, we have to go back and recognize what's the purpose of a branch. Remember, go back 70, even almost 80 years at this point when branches started. Remember, we used to all have one branch, wasn't even a branch, it was headquarters, and they were located in a city somewhere or maybe a town if it was more local. And then as people moved in the 40s and 50s out to the suburbs, somebody in some bank somewhere in this country said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we build a building closer to where our customers actually live? It was about convenience, but it was about the ability to interact with people. And Jim, all this money that's being spent on building new branches, designing new branches, and putting money into the branch of the future with kiosks and videos, this is the branch of the future, a table and 2 chairs so that people can talk. And it isn't about whether branches are dead. The real critical question is, how much are you allocating of your total pot of money you have for new development to branches? And if you're putting a lot of that money and not putting it into digital development, I think we got a problem here.
Well,
what's your take?
To the same point, we did research that said this year, retail banking trends and predictions, and we said, what is going to happen in your organization as far as build, close, or remodel? 62% of smaller organizations said they're going to build a branch. 62%. There was 20-some% that said they're going to reduce their branch footprint. It was the aha moment, or the blah moment, because the problem is, what are we trying to do with that? Usually when we ask a financial institution, why are you building a new branch? They're going to say, because we want to generate new accounts. I'll tell you what, be it 1 million, be it 1.5 million, be it 3 million, I can show you how to generate more accounts by fixing your front door with a new account opening and the onboarding process than by building a branch. Now, that doesn't mean that your current branches are structured right, designed right, positioned right. So there still needs to be investment in branches, if for no other reason than to modernize what you have, but not to add more, in my opinion. And I think, I was with an organization a couple weeks ago. They have just built a branch in an old Baskin Robbins. So to your point, counter, ATM, ITM possibly, a teller, and a manager to open accounts. And they don't even need all those things, but they're able to convert it immediately and actually took some of the space and made it retail. So they even divided that up differently. So let's rethink the branch process and find a way to do that. When we talk about that, it gets down to humans. We go back to the day where ATM is going to replace humans. Online banking, going to replace humans. The digital banking, going to replace humans. We haven't really replaced the humans, but when we think about it, how about the argument between, will bots take your job? Will bots take my job? That's the question I care about right now. But what's your thought on that?
So listen, everything I seem to read and hear about artificial intelligence suggests that I, as a consultant, an analyst, and a writer, will be rendered obsolete by these new technologies. So it's kind of got me thinking and worrying a bit that, maybe they're right. Maybe I should retire. I think I can manage. I'm a fortunate guy. I have enough money to last me the rest of my life. But I have a wife and 3 daughters and only have enough to last them the rest of the month. So I'm not going anywhere. And bots aren't taking my job. Listen, I've asked ChatGPT, give me some answers and give me have some questions and feed me back the answer in the tone of Ron Shevlin's snark, and it's not as good as me. But more importantly, Jim, here's why it's not going to take our jobs. There are some jobs it's going to take, but most of us in this room and most of the people who work with you and report to you will not lose their jobs because of AI and bots. Because the job of the bot is not to completely replace us, it is to augment us, to make us smarter, better, and faster. If you need help remembering that, remember Samuel Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Smarter, better, maybe that's not a good example. All right, let me go back. Smarter, better, faster. It is about accelerating the processes and getting us to a point in the process, well, we don't have to spend weeks pulling data together or spending weeks writing up things. It's going to get us much faster. It's not going to take or degrade our jobs. It's going to upgrade our jobs.
Well, it's interesting also because when you look at how we're using bots today in banking, we're using them a lot of times to supplement or to augment or to replace the call center. Bots do a great job of asking questions. At least in my experience, they're not really good at providing a personalized solution to my question. I have an experience with Delta Airlines. The bot asked me all the right questions, and then they said, but now you have to wait till you land to find out what the solution is. I did that. They said, well, you haven't landed your final destination. I had it with bots by that time. But the reality is, the human versus bots today in my life, in my generative AI and bots, are basically, as you said, enhancing what I do, making it easier what I do. There's no excuse for writer's block today with generative AI. But I think for all of us, the way to make it so that it doesn't take your job is don't stand still. You know, I think what has happened is the business has changed so fast that to keep up with it is a chore, but it's to make it so that the technology doesn't take over what I do. Because if I just do rudimentary, it'll take over my job. I think you're right. Not only eventually the bots will take over the way your personality performs, as bad as it is. It will still follow you. But that said,
it's not, you're not saying my personality. Are you talking about personality is bad?
Well, your snarkiness. There we go. Okay, you're a good guy,
dude. The highest level form of intelligence and humor is snark. So if you don't like snark, that's not my problem.
So that being said, what's really interesting about that is that we have to continually educate ourselves as we're educating the technology. So, you know, moves us really quickly into generative AI, because it really, when you look at that, it is a component of that whole bot environment, that whole technology versus human. You know, we're both marketers by trade. We both continue to focus on marketing as far as areas we want to talk about. How big is the impact of generative AI going to be on marketing?
Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. It's going to be huge, and not just because it changes the way people do their jobs in marketing, because it's going to actually change our interactions as marketers with the agencies that we're using. We've relied on the agencies to do a lot of creative work in the past, both from a copywriting perspective, graphics perspective. And for folks that, some of you might have been here last year, we did an AI workshop, and Lindsay Ogan, CMO at Stride Bank, told a story about how she and her team turned to generative AI, ChatGPT. They wanted to do a marketing campaign tied to a Jurassic Park movie, and asked ChatGPT to generate some graphics of dinosaurs doing banking activities and give me 10 taglines for our marketing campaign. She then went and did the whole thing all over again with the marketing agency, then went back to the management team at Stride and said, okay, here are our options, and didn't tell them which ones were generated by ChatGPT and which ones were generated by the agency, and I don't have to tell you how this story ends. But my first reaction to that was, well, agencies are toast. But then I realized, no, that's not the thing, because they're going to make better use, and what's really going to happen is that the agencies will do a lot less creative work because the tools will do it for us. But somebody still, Jim, has to track the data, the impact, the results of these campaigns, and understand how to create the strategies around them. And the tools can help change that a lot, but not do it for us. So it's going to really change the way creative work gets done in marketing, how the graphic works get done, but it's going to speed up the whole process so that you as marketers can be a whole lot more responsive to changes in the market and not take 4 to 6 or even 8, 12 weeks to get campaigns out the door.
You know, it's interesting because we talked about with the bots or human situation. It's the same thing. Marketers take advantage of the technology out there. Last year, we would have talked about how you're building copy, how you're building web pages, things of this nature, all in the word sense. Well, now, in the last year, we see that not only can it create images, but now it can create images and videos. It can look just like unique individual campaigns, you know, again, to get back to the agency business. But what we need to use that for is an idea generator. I use the fact that, you know, if you get writer's block in the world of generative AI, you aren't using generative AI, because it will give you enough ideas to get off writer's block. Now, what it comes to, though, is not looking for the answer first, but learning how to use the questions. How do you prompt the tools to come up with the right solution? And I think that's where the agencies are going to get really a lot better, saying, we've got to get better at asking what we have to find out, as opposed to simply going right to artwork.
But the tools, Jim, are getting better at actually prompting us as the humans to ask smarter questions. Used to be you'd tell ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever, what it is you want, and it would go do it. Now it actually comes back, and if I ask, say, hey, tell me about banks, it'll come back and say, US banks? What size banks? And start to probe and ask more deeper questions. I think the important thing I really would want to leave you here with about generative AI and the impact is, it is changing the interface that we have with computing. We went from the DOS prompt. Anybody remember the DOS prompt? Yeah, you don't want to admit how old you are, like Jim and I are. We remember the C prompt, but then graphical user interfaces came, and who is it in your organization that really knows how to get stuff done? It's the people who know the menu structure and can pick and choose and just, we don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
We now have an interface that is more text-based, and we just ask it and tell it what to do. And it's that interface that really is what the impact is going to be on not just marketing, but almost every function in your business.
You know, sticking on the whole aspect of humans, you know, have we seen the end of work from home? Are we in the beginning? Are we in the mid stages? What are we going to see in the marketplace? Well, one thing I know is that there is going to be work from home forever, because a whole generation or a whole group of people, that's all they've known, and they don't feel like they need the office. Now, will they have the leverage to do that? It's going to be seen. And how's the banking industry going to compare to other industries? And we're going to put ourselves in a bind there. You know, Ron, you again have published quite a bit and talked quite a bit about the organizations that are forcing people to get back to work and in the office, and those that don't. And there's been some good arguments on both sides. What have you seen most recently?
I think there's a real mix out there in the marketplace. Let's quick show of hands. I don't think I can actually see everybody here. How many of you have a hybrid policy where you enable certain folks to work from home?
Most of them, yeah.
How many of you are totally back to you've got to work from the office? Are there any hands out there?
Very few. Yeah, there are a couple.
That's not bad. That's good. Here's the problem. The arguments for working in the office usually comes down to, well, it's about our culture and we need to build our culture. And I think the reality is, Jim, is that, look, your organizations are not just about the employees within the four walls of your organization. You go downstairs, there are a lot of technology vendors, service providers who love to call you their partners, even though you're customers, you pay them money for that stuff. But reality is you rely on them on a day-to-day basis. There is none of you, I can't even imagine there's any of you, who do not rely on some level of third-party providers. What makes that work? Well, they provide good technology, tools, products, and services, but what also matters is that they kind of have a good cultural fit with your organization. And so the culture argument from working from the office, because it helps us build this culture, is nonsense. Because you're always working with folks outside of the organization who are not in your office. But I will say this, Jim, is that you and I both have kids who are in their 20s, and it kills me that both your son and my youngest daughter have never worked a day in the office. And I don't think that's healthy for their ability to know how to interact with people. Yes, they rely heavily on technology to do it. What's your take?
I'm going to do a little papa moment here, and I'm going to say it's really going to depend on the person. I until recently, did not see my son at work every day because we were living in a different place. Well, he now lives with us for the last 6 months. And I realized that watching what his work habits are, it depends on the person you're trying to hire or trying to work with. I think he is totally comfortable with that scenario. And what's interesting when he gets his reviews, it's not about the work he gets done. It's the way he interacts with people. His company's always been a work from home organization, but they like him because of the way he works with people, the way he interacts, his leadership skills. And it's interesting because my son was an athlete. He was a captain of his team. And he says to me, he goes, my athletic capabilities and my managing of a team during COVID made it so I'm using more of those skills than I am my technical skills as far as my work, and that's the most valuable thing. I think it depends on the person. I think we can't have a full this, full that, because it's going to mess us up. Some people, you can't expect them to ever be on a Zoom call. They're always on invisible mode, or they have some movement. You go, hey, I saw that movement previously in this call, and you go, they're technology savvy. They make it look like they're there, but they're not. On the other hand, there's going to be those who don't need that inspiration, don't need that. What it gets down to is trust. And I will mention the company's name, Encino. They had a leader that basically interviewed every senior management person and secondary management person ahead of time under the guise that who can work on their own, who can be inspired by their own. Now, they still got together. It wasn't like they were totally remote all the time. But the reality is it's going to be an individual by individual level as to what's the best for them, not what's the best for us. Go ahead.
What was the name of the tool that allowed you to make yourself look like you were there?
I wish I knew.
Yeah, find out for me.
We're using it right now, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I don't think. Well, so it's funny bringing up the topic of Gen Z and younger consumers. There are a lot of focus these days, Jim, on a lot of these institutions that are here represented today are really focused on finding younger consumers. And I kind of look at it and I go, really? These guys don't even have two nickels to rub together. Is it worth the hassle? What's kind of your take on what's happening from a Gen Z perspective?
Is any segment worth the hassle? And do you really understand them? I think our biggest dynamic right now is you can't define the way people bank based on their age. I mean, we know it. In my household, for instance, we have two people, my wife and I, at virtually the same age. We bank entirely differently, and you cannot talk to her the way you talk to me, because we're going to be prompted by different things. When we talk about personalization, that becomes even more important. Just in the same way, my son and his wife are very different in the way they bank, what they want from a trust standpoint. It was interesting, my son made the decision to move from a more small community bank to work with Chase, because he said, I want branches nearby where I know whenever I need something going forward, I'm going to be able to go to it when I want to. He's never gone into a bank branch in his life, but he says, well, now that I'm married, I want to have that more responsible mentality. It was very interesting. But the reality is, are they worth it? I think they're worth it. But the reality is they're going to ask for a lot more than you probably are ready or able to deliver. Is the banking world ready to put up with the hassle of a Gen Z?
I can't even comprehend this, because we're talking about this as if Gen Z were some homogenous group of people,
right, exactly,
with the same exact, and forget the attitudinal thing or the generational stuff kind of thing. The reality is that everybody has different sets of banking and financial management needs. And this comes back to where your geography, either geographic focus or affinity focus is, and what your strategy is. And the reality is that you've got to figure out what are the markets and segments you're going after that have unique banking and business needs and financial management needs. That may be heavily concentrated with, quote, younger consumers, or it might span a broader span. Let me give you an example of this, Jim. We're old baby boomers, sorry, and we're predominant, even though you're not you're an entrepreneur.
I'm not a younger baby boomer.
No, that's for sure. But you're an entrepreneur, and you may not have a W-2, but hey, I'm a W-2 guy, and most of us baby boomers are. You look at the younger populations, and not just Gen Z, but millennials as well, and more, they're 1099ers. They're gig workers, 66 million gig workers. They've got side hustles. They're side, oh my gosh, have you seen this? On average, people with side hustles are making $10,000 a year. I saw one article recently about a guy who was saying that he makes $250,000 a year on his side hustle, working 8 hours a week. That pisses me off. I have to work 12 hours a week to make that kind of money. But my point is that these are unique needs from a fund management.
You only work for 1 week a year, so that's another dynamic.
That's another thing. Yeah, this is the only week I have to work. This is hard, man. But my point is there are unique banking needs. These people have to account for it, invoice, they have to pay taxes. And so it's not about Gen Z, it is about what are the unique banking needs that are emerging from new behaviors and work setups.
It's interesting. What's old is new again. We were talking 20 years ago about geez, we segment our customer base. And then we're talking about different generational aspects. And again, looking at, oh, they're all going to be the same. Honestly, I bank like my son does, not like other people, other one of my friends that they do. I have one friend who has retired. He's retired. He spends most of his time going from bank to bank to open a new account to get the $250 balance bonus. And he works close enough to the company's direct deposit to be able to divide his direct deposit into 8 places. So he has 8 accounts, but he's generated $1,600 this year in funds from financial institutions.
You've lost me on that one, man. But I want to tell you something. Speaking of retired, I am retired. I was tired this morning and I'm tired again now. Go ahead.
Retired. That's
Retired.
Right. So you know what? We've talked about moving from experience to engagement and the importance of getting some dynamics of the back and forth. You know, number one, is engagement just jargon? And number two, just importantly, can we even achieve that?
Yeah, listen, if you're telling your management team, if you're in digital or in marketing, and you're going back to your management team and going, hey, our customers or members logged on 50 billion times this month, and you're calling that engagement, you're crazy, stop it, that's not what management thinks. You've got to rethink what so is it jargon and useless? It can be, depending on how you think or how you define what engagement is. Years ago, I had written a report about engagement, and my definition actually made it to Wikipedia until some guy took it out. And I defined it as the degree of emotional connection that somebody has with your organization. If anybody here has been in the military and been deployed, you're probably the closest buddies you have are those that you were deployed with, because you had an intense period of engagement with them that drove this connection. And so engagement isn't logging on 50 million times and checking your account balances. That's actually a sign of desperation that you probably have some financial problem. But it's about things like, are they coming to your members and customers coming to you and asking for advice? Are they using the tools you're providing to make their financial life and financial health better? And those are the kinds of things, Jim, that these organizations need to be measuring and segmenting from an engagement perspective, and seeing that, you know, is there a model customer, a model member that you have that behaves in a certain way that will drive and deepen the relationship, not simply because they're pumping away and checking the account balances 5 times a day.
You know, I use the example quite often around the fact that my Uber app, especially when I go overseas, continues to engage with me during my ride from the airport to the hotel. It asks me, okay, you've just landed. Do you want us to order something for delivery at your hotel you're staying at? They don't have to ask me where I'm staying or anything. They have both sides of the equation. I say, I don't act. They go, by the way, if you're going out for dinner tonight, here's some recommendations. Those recommendations are based on where I've gone before with Uber. It's based on open table relationships I have with them because they have a partnership with them. It's also looking at proximity. It also goes as far as to saying, here's some things in the area that you may be interested in, and it's based on what I've done in the past. Where have I taken Uber? I've taken it to a Airbnb experience tour of urban artwork. It's taken me to a place where I can get a make-from-home food or learn how cooking lessons. They give me these on my app because of how they've seen where I've gone and what I'm doing. They also know how I tip and what I like and what I don't like. That's what I want from an engagement standpoint. But what they're doing is they're actually using information and insight to make my lack of having to make decisions easier. And as I get older, that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to make decisions, and I don't want to make financial decisions any more than I want to make decisions on where to eat. I want my financial institution to actually look like they're going to be a partner with me. If they do, I'll engage with you more. On the other hand, when you don't know that I'm having deposit or money taken out of both my business and personal account on an ongoing basis with Acorns, you don't realize that twice a month I do a mobile deposit capture between one financial institution to the other because they don't talk well together. If you don't know that I'm looking for a car while every dealer and every manufacturer knows I'm doing it, you're not even close to engaging with me. In fact, you're pissing me off.
But Jim, here's the problem. Here's the problem I've got with this is, first of all, I will adamantly fight you on this, that I don't believe every customer wants an engagement and wants that. If the bank that I do banking with would probably look at my wife and I and think we are completely disengaged. because we don't need them for stuff. We're not moving our money. Yeah. We've been loyal for 35 years, but we don't have an engagement with them, but that does not mean we're not loyal. If they get something wrong, that's when my wife and I go rip shit. I can say rip shit, right?
Yeah.
So that's when we engage.
If David Spade can say it, you can say it.
Oh, that's right. So let me mess up my hair a little bit. Did you see how bad his hair looked the other day? Oh, man. Right? See, I was watching.
I'm not going the colonoscopy route. I'll tell you that right now.
Right? My wife's had an impact. You think I would have noticed that if it weren't for her? Of course not. But my point is that not everybody wants to be engaged. Here's the other issue, Jim, from the younger consumer perspective, is that the folks in this room have a limited view of what their customers and members are doing with their financial lives, because especially younger consumers are using 20, 30 different apps. And they're engaging. They're not shutting down their accounts with these folks, but they're doing things like subscription management and all these other things.
Yeah.
So why are they doing that? Because financial performance. It isn't financial health. So let's get us into our next topic, and health and wellness. And I'd love to get your take on what do you see going on from a financial health, wellness, literacy perspective, and then we'll get into whether or not there are opportunities to differentiate.
Number one, consumers are not looking for, in most cases, page after page after page of guidance on how to be financially well or how to be financially literate. Bottom line is, if that's where they are, you probably don't want them as a customer. And that's just a lazy way out. What they want are answers. They want ways to make it so that you'll help them be more financially smart for those who are looking for that. How am I going to reduce my debt? How are you going to help me reduce my debt? Not how are you going to reduce my debt? I think we tend to think that, good news is ChatGPT can get me over the hurdle and make it so I can generate 400 pages of copy that my customer's going to read on their mobile app, not, or on their computer, not, or going to take it and print it off and read it. That's not the route to go. How are you seeing organizations addressing that whole wellness solution perspective?
Tools, not PDFs. It isn't about education. It isn't about literacy. And it really isn't even about financial health. It's about performance. And there is a difference between health and performance. And think of this as a spectrum of, on one hand is poor health, but the other end of the spectrum is not good health. The other end of the spectrum is high performance. Good health is only in the middle of the spectrum. And there's more. Look, if you pay your bills on time and make more than you spend and have good security, you have good financial health. That doesn't mean that you have high performance. If you're not optimizing the rate of savings and the savings and investment rates that you have and minimizing your expenses and getting the best deals, you haven't maximized or optimized performance. And so more and more, I think where a lot of the smart financial institutions are going, Jim, and it's twofold here. Number one, they're providing and integrating a lot more tools for things like subscription management and automated savings and investments and all those kinds of tools, and integrating it into their mobile apps and checking accounts, and actually killing two birds with one stone, because number one, they're helping their members and customers improve their financial performance, and they're driving engagement because now those members and customers don't have to go somewhere else to do it. And they're not doing this through education. They're giving people tools to get the job done. Don't teach me how to do something. Nope. Just either do it for me or give me something that'll do the job.
Okay, a quick raise of hands. How many of you have a step counter in your watch you look at every day to see how well you did? Almost a lot of people. How many have gotten an Oura ring in the last year and realize you can't tell me how to sleep, but I look at it, everything to say, how well did I do? What was my sleep score? The reality is the healthcare industry and the technology industry is finding ways to connect with us in a way through tools to say, how can I make myself at least feel like I'm getting healthier? On the same side, my healthcare provider provides me tools that I go to regularly to say, what was my score? What was my blood count? How did I do this? How did I do that? When these start to interact, that's the holy grail. we can do that in the financial service industry, but as you said, let's use the digital tools to connect and make it so that we engage because we want to engage, not because our financial institution says we should engage.
There's one other thing that I've been really hot on for the past couple of years, Jim, and I struggle to kind of get this across, is that so many of these organizations out here are truly concerned with improving their members and customers' financial health. But here's the thing, there is an inextricable link between mental health, physical health, and financial health. Mental health problems lead to physical and financial health problems. Financial problems lead to physical and health, and vice versa. If you are not helping your customers and members deal with the holistic triangle of financial, mental, and physical health, you're not helping them to the extent you want to help. And I think that's going to lead to a really big change in the industry. Because we got the question here, are there opportunities to differentiate? Yeah. And I absolutely believe there are for those organizations that say we're going to transcend just the physical aspect of this and start integrating products and services and whatever it is that help them deal with the health problem from a three-point holistic perspective.
Great takeaway. You know, we talked about this before. We used to use other companies and all this. You think, let's make this kind of quick. We're getting near the end. Who'll be first to launch a bank? Will it be Amazon? Will it be Apple? Will it be somebody else?
Apple's already a bank. Yeah, they don't have a license, but let's get real. If they walk like a duck, quack like a duck, they're a duck. Apple is a bank. They already provide credit cards, debit cards, savings accounts, all these things. They're a bank. I don't know who beat them, if Apple or Amazon was the first to it, because Amazon's been offering payment services for a long time. Already a bank. Your take?
Same thing. I think both Amazon and Apple are doing 9/10 of what banks can do without having to be a bank. Who wants a regulatory environment? Which one wants to get the government all of a sudden knocking on your door going, okay, you've now gone one step too far. And the whole privacy and identity issue in of itself is a major thing. Amazon's got a good model going on. Apple's got a pretty good model going on. You know, they'll stick to their knitting. However, they're going to be in every single aspect of financial services the way they are already today. Great. I think it's interesting because it doesn't matter. They are a competitor. And we're surrounded by competitors, fintechs, all kinds of organizations, Chime, Varo. Overseas, there's a number of organizations. I think we have to realize that competition is not going away. We're going to continue to have this, and it's going to be getting more and more difficult to identify where the relationship lands and what's the most important relationship. You know, we're kind of out of time. We knew we weren't going to get through all, but you know, let's get a little personal here, Ron. You know, there's things I know about you that maybe not everybody here knows about you. Let's start with one. What genre of music or musical group is your favorite?
Let me answer that this way. Tom Petty once said, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus." My comeback to that is, if it ain't got a jam, it ain't worth a damn. Jam bands, Grateful Dead, all the way, Jim.
You are a Deadhead all the way.
And you?
Oh, it's hard to tell by my playlist what I move towards. The boss, Bruce Springsteen, has had I've gone to 25 concerts, saw him at Wembley last year. He's probably the top dog, but when you talk about genres, which is really where I go to more, because I don't listen to Bruce Springsteen all the time, I'm listening to adult alternative, and more importantly, EDM. That's something most people wouldn't have known about me. Somebody came up to me and said, what? My goal is next year I'm going to go to the Ultra Festival in Miami. I'm going to sit in a seat where I don't have to be on the ground, because there's nothing worse than a short guy at a concert where everybody's standing and jamming. And my eyes are going to be everywhere but on the stage, because I like people watching in the great sense, not the bad sense. But it's interesting. It gets me going. It keeps me going. It's where I want to go next for my next concert. So, okay, second one. Your favorite sports team. You're a New Yorker that lives in Boston.
Yeah, so my favorite sports team is whatever Boston team is winning at the moment. Oh. The Bruins have had an absolutely horrible year, so screw them. Celtics all the way, they're doing great. We'll see what happens with the Red Sox. And if the Red Sox suck, I'm I'm rooting for the Yankees again. Yeah, I'm not very popular in the Boston area.
Oh, so you go to every team that's winning. I am leaving Cleveland. Nobody wins. I just canceled my Browns tickets because I'm tired of paying more and more and more for less and less and less. I love the Guardians. I love the Indians. You know, some people that know me well go, okay, you have a tattoo? No, I don't have a tattoo, but I have a deal with a friend we've had for 25 years that the first team that's a Cleveland team between the Browns and Guardians or Browns and Indians, we're going to get a tattoo of either Brownie or the Wahoo Indian. We're not going to put a Guardian on our ankle. But bottom line is, it's that loyal. But as most people say, good luck. You're not going to have any tattoos because they'll never win.
Okay, my turn for a question.
Yep.
We're winding down. We'll take up the rest of our time with this one. Jim, you write, you do podcasting, you speak. I have to believe you must do something else in your life other than banking.
Oh, yeah.
What is it? What drives you, man?
Besides dog walking, which is not really an ongoing process, it's bike riding. People that know me know that my personal transformation journey has really been motivated by my desire to ride a bike. I ride a road bike. I don't go dirt riding. I like doing distances. We live 8 miles when we're down in Florida. We live 8 miles from the beach. I go back and forth often during a week. I love riding the bike. It gets me away from everything, clears my mind. Anything with the family, that's pretty much it. How about you?
So if you would have asked me this 5 years, I would have had a different question. But at this point in time, the answer is spending time with the grandchildren. Let me tell you all something, okay? No, it doesn't apply. Let me tell you all something. If I had known how great it was going to be a grandparent, I would have skipped the middle step. That was 30 years of hell, man, to get to the point where I got this 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old grandson. Absolutely amazing stuff to just see that and be able to just hand them back to mom when they pee in their pants.
Okay, I'm gonna hit you with the final question. This is a tough one. What's something that really virtually nobody in this room knows about Ron Shevlin?
Oh, we're out of time, and I am so sorry that we don't have time to answer that one. I can't even begin to pull that kind of stuff out of my head because it's so far in there. What were you gonna tell them?
Probably very unexpectedly, but tied to banking. I went to a bank in Columbus that said we have to build our brand. We want to take the current 4th of July festivities, which was an orchestra with about 14,000 people that showed up and some fireworks. We want to make it bigger. I left that job at a time when we had moved it to 500,000 people in Columbus, Ohio, an event called Red, White, and Boom. I was on the Today Show with Willard Scott back at, some of you are old enough to remember Willard Scott holding the fireworks shell. I know more about fireworks than anybody would ever care to, but for 10 years, I was the executive director of a fireworks program. Even after I left the bank, I stayed involved in it. And it's a claim to fame that most people don't know. You know, talked about the difference between 12-inch and 17-inch and 14-inch shells, and the way we're going with drones right now is pretty exciting.
I'm just impressed you haven't killed yourself doing all that stuff. So, Jim, my friend, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, everybody.